Hi.
Ay, ay, ay.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Okay. So
Hello.
hi, Steve. So we're going to start. Today's daf is Masechta Bava Kamma daf Samach Aleph, and we're going to start by Samach Amid Beis, about 13 lines from the bottom. By Yisaveh David. So we're darshaning a pasuk in Tehil in Shmuel Beis, which is a little strange. David is at war with the Plishtim, and he really desires Vayomer, and he says, Mi yashkeni mayim mibar beis lechem asher b'ashar. I'm so thirsty. Can somebody get a drink of water from the pit that's in Beis Lechem? Vayivku shloishes hagibarim. Three powerful people broke through B'machne Plishtim in the camp of the Vayishavu mayim mibar beis lechem ashar, and they gave David a melech to drink. Hi, Lewis. Again.
Hi.
Okay, so we're just discussing over here that there's a pasuk in Navi that says that David was very thirsty. He asked, "I wish I could get a drink," and he was and he was telling the people, who could get me a drink of water. So three people broke through the camp of the Plishtim and drew water and gave David a melech a drink. So this is a strange in Shmuel, which seems like who cares? He was thirsty, and three heroes came and gave him found water. So the Gemara understood that really David HaMelech wasn't thirsty. He just wanted people to ask the Sanhedrin what the psak halacha would be. So the question is, and this is like a mashal. So what was David HaMelech's question to the Sanhedrin? Amar Rava, Amar Rav Nachman, Tomim be'esh kami bayale. He had a question: what's the halacha if you burn a field and something's hit in that field? Are you chayiv to pay? Let's say I put a purse full of money in the field, and you started a fire and burned it. Are you obligated to pay for that? So he didn't know if you paskin ik Rabbi Yehuda, ik Rabbanan. Who do you paskin like, Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbanan? And they explained it to him. They told him what the halacha. Rabbi Yehuda says you're liable for taman be'esh, and Rabbi Rabbanan say you're not liable. And we don't know what they paskin, but that was his question. Rav Huna says Gedishim desorim Yisrael have the matamre plishtim behu. So he said that his question was that the Plishtim were hiding out in the stacks of barley belonging to Jewish people. So there's an easy way to get rid of the Plishtim is just burn them all out, right? But the question is, by starting a fire, you're actually destroying the stacks of Sa'orim belonging to the Jewish people. The Kaboyalain, his question was, can I save myself on purpose, then destroy the barley belonging to those Jewish owners with the intention of paying them back? Which intention of paying them back? He didn't know which Jews these Sa'orim belonged to, and he was he knew that the Plishtim are there, so he could easily start a fire and end the whole war. But he didn't want to start the fire because that's causing damage to another Jewish person. They answered back to David HaMelech, you're not allowed to save yourself with the money belonging to your friend. You are a king. A melech could do whatever he wants. He can breach a road and nobody can stop him. So for the commoner, it's prohibited, but for you, David HaMelech, it's permitted. And they say, Gedishin the Yisrael, the Yisrael Havam. Ugdishin the Adoshin the Plishtim. He had stacks of Sa'orim belonging to a Jew and stacks of lentils, which is human food, belonging to the Plishtim. And this was his question. And his question was, Mahu litin Gedishin Sa'oir lifting lifnei behemtai. He wanted to take, without permission, the stacks of animal food belonging to the Jewish people, almanas l'shalim gedishim shaladashim the plishtim, that when he's going to be successful in this war, he's gonna acquire stacks of human food, lentils, beans of the Pelishtim, and then he'll pay these Jewish people back. Shalchulei Chavol Yashiv Rosh Gzeil Yishalem. What they sent him back a pasuk. Afal Pisha Gzeil Yishalem. Even though you're paying back what you stole, Rashahu, you're an evil person. Aval Ato Melech Ato, you are a king. Umelech Paris Lasel Derech Ve'ein Meichem Biyadei. A king could breach and do whatever he wants. He's sort of like above the law, and that's the halacha. So there's three answers of what David HaMelech was questioning. Either he was questioning Talmud Ba'esh, either he was questioning, can he burn the Sa'orim belonging to the Jews to save himself, or can he exchange stealing the Sa'orim belonging to the Yisrael and pay them back with beans? So the Gemara asks the question, that he's just making an exchange, that's the question. He was just making an exchange. He was going to steal the animal food and pay back with normal food, human food. That's why it says one pasuk describing the story. There was lentils there. Another pasuk says there were barley there. So it seems that the story corroborates that something had to do with a barley field and a lentil field. If his question was to burn the field, why is there two psukim saying that describing the event as two different types of fields? One is an adashim field and one is a barley field. So he will answer you, the answer is simple, that there was also a lentil field that Plishtim, that belonging to the Jews, that Plishtim were hiding out there. So that's why the pasuk in Divrei Yomim describes the story as a barley field, and the pasuk in Shmuel describes it as a lentil field. So the Gemara asks a question: that he held back and he didn't burn it down. What does it mean? He saved it. I mean, if it was just a common exchange, he's going to steal it and then pay back with adashim. So what was the pasuk saying that he saved? He didn't do it. And says the Gemara, he stopped himself from doing the exchange. In other words, David HaMelech paskined that I can't steal with the intention of paying somebody back. So that's why he didn't do it. Bishlam Hani Tarte, because of these two, Hani Diksiv Trey Cry. That's why we have two psukim. Ella Laman Diyam and Tama Be'esh Kamma, but there's an opinion that David HaMelech did neither. He just had a question of who the halacha is concerning the halacha of things hidden in the field during a fire. Do you have to pay or not? So what's the pasuk doing, telling us what type of field it was? If it was a lentil field or if it was a barley field, who cares? It could have been a wheat field. Doesn't matter. His question was Taman Beish. Who do you paskin like? Amalach, he will tell you Taman v'chad mahanach kaboyle. Yes, he had two questions. Who do you paskin like Taman? And who and the other, like he agreed with the other's interpretation that David HaMelech was concerned about achlufe, exchanging, or he was concerned about maybe just burning down their fields. So now the Gemara asks, Bishlam Lamandi Amahani Tarte, according to these two opinions of what the story was, now I understand. David didn't want to drink this water, so to speak, and he poured it l'Hashem. He just didn't take a drink from it. He said, Kivin the Iki Suri, there's an Isser over here. I'm not going to do such a thing. What is the Isser? Either I don't want to burn Jewish property, or I don't want to steal from Jewish property. That's why David HaMelech, even though he's a melech and could have done that, he's above the law, but he held back and didn't do it. But if, according to the opinion, that the question was, who do you paskin like by the machlokes between Tam and Be'esh? Michte Gemara hu de They told him who to paskin like. Why didn't he want to drink it? Why didn't he want to accept it? Answers the Gemara, he didn't want to say over this teaching in the names of the Giborim the strong people, the heroes that risked their lives to get the answer to David HaMelech. So David HaMelech was upset. They risked their lives to get the answer. Omar, he said, David HaMelech says, Kach mukubalani beis dina sheshmul aremasi. I have a tradition from Shmuel. If you risk your life to get a teaching of Torah, that's going too crazy. You don't say any halacha in his name because you're never supposed to risk your life for a teaching of Torah. Only for the three cardinal sins. But to get a teaching of Torah, you're risking your life. Even if you're successful, we never say the halacha in your name. So then the pasuk ends off before the Mishnah. Vayasech oisim Lashem. Javid poured the water to God. He didn't want to benefit from it. I understand if you learn that David HaMelech did not want to steal or did not want to exchange, did not want to burn down the field belonging to Jewish people. So then I understand he poured it out. He decided not to do it for the sake of God. According to the opinion that it was Tomen Be'esh, my v'yasech oisim Lashem. What does it mean? He poured it out and he didn't want to benefit from this water for God's name. And says the Gemara, Damrinu Mishmod the Gemara. He didn't want to. What it means is that although he got the answer, who you paskin like by Tomen Be'esh, he did not want to say, "Oh, these Giborim brought me that teaching." So he said anonymously, "I heard from God. This is the halacha." Because again, they risked their lives to get a teaching, and they risked their lives, took a big risk. And therefore, because you did that, we're not going to say the teaching in your name. So this is the Gemara just explaining a cryptic story in Navi. Now let's go to the Mishnah. The Mishnah is talking about that if you light a fire in your property and somehow it spreads and you didn't want it to spread, so there are certain times you're exempt. Okay? You see, if you light a fire in somebody else's property, you're always obligated, you're always liable. But if you light a fire in your own property, we give you a certain, and it spreads into your neighbor's property, sometimes you're not liable. For example, if it jumped over a fence, which is unusual for a fire to jump over a fence that's 8 feet tall, or it crossed over derech harabim. There was a distance of 16 amas between your field of emptiness, of like a main road, that people walk on with nothing's planted, to the next door neighbor's field. So if somehow the fire just crossed over, or jumped over a river, you're not exempt to pay because the fire did something so unusual, you're considered an oinus. Says the Gemara about time. So you say that the length, the height of the fence should be 4 amas. Well, Tanya, we learned in a brisa, if it goes over a fence that's 4 feet, that's 4 amas tall, you're liable. And our Mishnah says if it goes over a fence that's 4 amas tall, you're potter, you're not liable. Amar Papa explained. Really, the answer is that 4 is the limit. Once you're above 4, then you become exempt. So Tana Didan Kachashu Bilmal Mata. Our Tana of our Mishnah starts from the top to the bottom. Sheish amas if the fence is tall, 6 amas you potter, Chamish amas potter, Ad Abba amas until 4 amas, you're always going to be not liable. So that's how you read our Mishnah. As soon as you go below 4 amas, then you become liable. Tana de Bra, the Tana de Braisa is counting milmata lamal from bottom to top. Kachoshev. Shtei amas chayev, sholosh amas chayev. If the fence was 2 amas, you're liable. If it was even 3 amas, you're liable. Ad arba amas, up until 4 amas, ad v'loyad, up until 4 amas, you'll always be liable. But once you cross like an inch over arba amas, then like our Mishnah says, you're not going to be liable. So again, if there was a fence there, you can't fault the guy. That somehow this crazy fire did a 1 in 10 chance that it jumped over the fence. Amar Rava said, Dalat Amash Amru de Potter. Afila b'stei koitzim, even if the other field had flammable material in there. Again, if there's a fence, it's protected, and therefore you're not held liable if your fire that you started in your property spread to your neighbor, even though your neighbor had thorns there, which are very flammable. We need, from where the thorns end, the fence has to be higher from 4 amas from the top of those thorns, because that is the protective measure. But if it's only, let's say, if the thorns itself was 2 amas and the fence was 4 amas, so from the top of the thorns to the top of the fence is only a space of 2 amas, you will be held liable. Papa says, Rav says, Lo shanu ela b'koilachas. A type of fire that you become exempt is a type of fire that goes upwards, right? That goes upwards. Avo b'nichpepes. But if you started a fire that somehow is a very low fire that just spreads on the floor, even if it spreads 100 amas, you'll be chayav, because you started a special type of fire. You have to go to pyro school to know the different types of fire. So if you start this nichfefes fire, you'll always be held liable. Shmuel says no. Masnisa bin nichpefes. Our Mishnah is talking about you started this nichpefes fire, this very low flyer that spreads on the ground. But if you started a fire that just goes upwards, even if the fence was high, just a little minimal, you'll still be potter. Tanya kavasa de Rav, we learned like Rav, b'med davar mamum b'kailachas. Aval b'nichpechen ve'etzim mitzuin la, afila ad meyamil chayev. When do we say that a fence is a sufficient, or space of 16 amas is a sufficient distance to exempt you from being liable? Is only if you started a fire that's kailachas. But if you started a fire that's nichpepes, and that's a ground fire, and there's wood that it finds, afila ad meya amil, even if it goes 100 miles, yechayev. So that's the end of this Mishnah, that part of the Gemara. Then our Mishnah said, what happens? You started a fire in your property, and over Nahar, it crossed a river, or shlilus. Shlilus, let's call a little pond, like a puddle. Shem rechavim ches amis. That's the Brisa says that's wide 8 amis. So then you're going to be potter. Derech harabim. The question is, what is a derech harabim? Mantana, who says derech harabim, a space between your property and your neighbor's property of 16 amas will make you not liable anymore if the fire spreads. Amar Rav explained, Rabbi Eliezer he. It goes according to Rabbi Eliezer. Now we learned in the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer says, Sheish Esrei Amas Kederach Rishus Rabim. If you have a fire if you have a space of 16 amas, like a normal public road, that's enough to exempt you from being liable anymore if your fire spreads beyond that. So our Mishnah the author is Rabbi Eliezer. What happens? The Mishnah says, Abraisa says, Oy Nahar, or across a river, you're not liable. Rav Amar Nahar Mamish, it has to cross a river. Ushmul Amar Shmuel says, Arisa de Dalia, it has to be like a water channel. A water where there's water. So what's the difference between a water channel and a river? A river dries up every now and then. So, but you still have the river bed. So, Manda Amar Nahar Mamish, according to the opinion, Rav, who said that you need a Nahar Mamish, that keeps you exempt. Afagav the Lake Amaya. Even if there is no water there, you're going to be exempt. Umandi Amar Arisa Deloi, the one that said that if there's a water channel there, then you're exempt, is
I don't know what that is.
It's by mine only if it has water in, then you're liable. Less by mine, but if it doesn't have a water there, loy, then you will be held liable. It's not hossam. We learned in the Mishnah. Now we're going to explain what this shlilish means. My shlilis. In other words, you have to give payah on every separate field that you have. So let's say you have a field that's separated by a shlilis. You have to give payah on each of the fields separately. You can't combine. So now that's the Mishnah. So now we're going to explain my shlilis. What does it mean, shlilis? It's a place that rainwater gathers there. So I imagine it's like a huge, huge puddle. Rabbeva Amar Rabbi Yochanan Amar Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Amasamayim, it's a waterway. Shemachleka shol agpel. It like overflows and divides its water into different, I guess, irrigation channels. The one that says a puddle, certainly who will agree to the opinion that an amasamayim is separates for payah. The one that says amasamayim, but if it was just a puddle, that's not enough of a separation for fields regarding payah. Loy mafsik, it wouldn't separate the fields. The hani, we go to Amid Beis, bagne da'ara mikri, they're just considered holes in the ground and really not significant enough to consider that the two. It's two different.
He's considered a river.
Look, the Heilige Mishnah. Hamadlik b'toy shaloi ad Kamma tava hadleika. How much, if you start a fire in your property and it spreads, how far does the spread has to happen and you'll still be held liable? Rabbi Lezer ben Azariah Omer Royin Oisek ki ilu hu be'emtza beis kor. We see yourself as if you're middle of a base core, which means that you have imagine you're in the middle of a base core, so you have like 137 amas. That's you're up until 137 amas, you'll be held liable. Rabbi Eliezer is much lenient. Tezain amas, kederech Rosh. He holds you only held liable for 16 amas of damage. Rabbi Kiva Omer 50 amas. Right, so you started a fire, and by accident it spread into your neighbor's field. So you have a machlokes. How much does it have to spread into the neighbor's field, and you're liable? You're not held liable infinitely if it spreads into this field and the next field and the next field. That's not your fault. So
the wind could be a wind to take it over.
Right. So that's the wind. Rab Shimon, I mean, you always Shalom Yishalom es Amav es Habeira Hakol if you had like it depends on the fire. If you started a fire, you're always going to be held liable. Rab Shimon gives you unlimited liability. Says the Gemara of Leslay Rab Shimon Urubidaleka. Doesn't Rab Shimon give you certain limits on your liability when you start a fire? How could he say in our Mishnah there's unlimited liability if you start a fire? We find somewhere else where Rab Shimon does limit your liability. But now we learned in the Mishnah. There's certain like fire codes. If you want to put an oven in your house, make sure that the roof till the oven is on top of the oven is height 8 amas, because you don't want to hurt the people that are on the second floor. Let's say you put the oven on the second floor, so make sure there should be plaster underneath shloisha tefachim. Ubakira, if you're doing a small type of oven, tefach, you need just the plaster should be the height of a tefach. Okay, so you followed this fire code. Vim hizik, but let's say it did damage anyway. Mishalim asher hizik, you're still held liable. Rab Shimon says once you followed the fire code, if you followed the fire code and how to install an oven in your house and something happened, you're going to be not held liable. So we do see that Rab Shimon limits your liability. So how could, in our Mishnah, Rab Shimon holds that when you start a fire in your yard and it spreads, you'll always have unlimited liability. It depends, they'll estimate on what type of fire you started. That's exactly it. So the Gemara explains, it's if he started in his property a very tall fire, so we can expect that it could go a lot farther than 50 amas, like Rabbi Kiva says. So we'll just have to estimate how much of a fire he started in order to keep him liable. But we don't have unlimited liability. It just depends on what kind of a fire he started. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Halachik Rav Shimon, Amar Rav Nachman, Shmuel, Halachik Rav Shimon. We always estimate his liability based on the fire he started. Whereas other Tanaim held, we don't care about what he started, what the fire he started with. We'll always limit his liability of 16 amas or 50 amas, but not more than that. Next Mishnah. Hamadlik es a someone who starts a fire, v'hoya by kalim v'dolko, and it had kalim inside the godish. Let's say there were stacks of wheat there, and hidden inside there was like a purse of money, right? And the purse of money got burnt. So Rabbi Yehuda Ayman Mishalim Hashem B'Seicha, you pay for the purse of money because you started a fire. But Chachamim said, you only pay what's visible, whether it was stacks of wheat or barley. But what's hidden inside, the stack, you don't have to pay because Aish is potter on Toman. This is what we see. Now the Mishnah says, Hoya Gudi Kafesloi. Let's say there was a goat tied to the stack. The Eved Samach Loi, and the Eved was just hanging around the stacks, right? And then the fire happened, and both the goat and the slave were burnt. Chayev, you chayev to pay for the goat, but not, you held liable for the goat, but obviously not for the slave, because the slave could have ran away. But Eved Kafus, but if the slave was tied to the stack, so he couldn't run away, Ugdi Samalai, but the goat was there and could have ran away, and they both, the Nisra of Ibay, they both got burnt. Potter, you potter paying for the goat. Why? Because since you're going to be killed for killing a human being, so we don't make you pay for the goat. Even though there was, Rashi explains, even though there was no warning over there, still you're playing around with something that's a chayev misas bezdin, that you're supposed to be killed. You killed a human being. So therefore, once you're doing that, you're not going to have to pay for the goat. We have that kimle b'derabble. It's enough that you're getting the severe punishment of misa. So we're not going to make you pay the fine of paying for the financial civil damages that for the goat that you did. Umaydim chachamim, and this will stop over here at the end of the Mishnah. Umaydim chachamim Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Chachamim agreed to Rabbi Yehuda that although the chachamim said you never pay for something hidden in the stacks, but they would agree, b'madlik esabira, if you started a fire and you burned down somebody's palace, shu b'shalom asher b'soicha, you pay whatever that he had inside the palace, inside the house. So the owner of the house has to swear, I had this furniture or that furniture, because shekain derech b'nei adam laniach b'batim, people put furniture and stuff, normal things, into their house. So Chachamim say that if you started a fire, you'll have to pay for the damage to those items. Whereas normally keep things hidden inside a field. So therefore, Chachamim will hold you exempt in a field for hidden items. Whereas if you burn somebody's house down, you are held liable for things inside the house. Okay, we'll stop over here.